Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Taurus and Cancer rising. Earth and water are feminine signs, and so there's always going to be that domestic side of life, especially the Cancer part of the equation because Cancer rules the fourth house of home and family in astrology. So this combination can be like a homebody type of person, whether it's male or female. And even if you're on the young side, which for me, that's what I would say, especially if you're your 20s or 30s, when you're in your 30s, you might already have a family of your own. Let's just say in your teens or 20s, you may be um, one of those people that is quite different than the people around you in the sense that you really love um, decorating your home or your apartment if you live by yourself, or you just have kind of like old-fashioned tendencies, and people might even notice that about you and kind of tease you a little bit. But I'll tell you, somebody with Cancer rising does not like to be teased, even if they know that the person isn't being malicious. You just have that very self-protective part about yourself because Taurus is an earth sign, and earth signs are not emotional in and of themselves. They're very grounded, obviously, earth, but they have more of a desire to live life and to like interact with life in a rational way. And they might even see emotions as being irrational, like I want to be very logical. I want to be, very rational about this particular situation. So I'm going to start by talking about the ascendant, also known as a rising sign, Cancer. Cancer is a cardinal water sign. Cardinal modality means that it is a self-starter, initiates projects, takes action very easily. The water modality is all about feeling your way through life. Now, it isn't the most influential part of your personal points, but it is, when you're on the younger side, especially before the age of 30, it might very well be the most influential. So that can, it's your ruler, the ruler of your chart, and the ruler of Cancer is the moon. So you're ruled by the moon, which also is indicative of the emotional nature, but also the moon in astrology represents fluctuation. So there can be a tendency, maybe in life as a whole, for things to change. There's like the shifting tides. And that can be a little bit disconcerting to Taurus because Taurus is a fixed earth sign. So Taurus really likes things to stay the same, to be predictable. When we think about the word predictable, a lot of people use it like in a negative way. Well, Taurus wouldn't see it as a negative thing. Taurus would see it as a plus, actually. So when you're ruled by the moon, you can wear your heart on your sleeve. And that can mean that one day you may be very jovial and you're joking around a lot. And the next day, you might be very quiet and kind of keeping to yourself, or maybe you're downright morose, because Cancer, ruling the fourth house, deals with the past, and that can include childhood. And it can, when we talk about the past, there can be sentimentality of like, oh, things used to be so much better. People who have a prominent Cancer tend to be very um, sentimental about people, places, and things. So the symbol of Cancer is the crab, and the crab has claws. And those claws can be very tenaciously holding on to something or someone. And this may be, so this combination can be very possessive. Yeah, for sure, because Taurus can be very jealous. And that's because Taurus rules the second house of earned incomes and possessions. So Taurus people can see people that they care about as their possessions. So, but there's also, just like I said, there's like that fixed quality about Taurus combined with Cancer, connecting with the emotions and connecting with the past, where sometimes we tend to kind of reinvent history, or maybe things were better at one time, but then they deteriorated. And, one of the hardest things to do sometimes is to see when something that once seemed so good isn't anymore, and be able to move away from it. This combination may have a hard time doing stuff like that. And that can include people. And that depending on how savvy this type of person is in choosing a partner, that will depend on, if they have to move on. But if this combination has a history of like making bad choices in romance, then that could lead to being in dysfunctional relationships, but still not being able to walk away from it because either, being afraid of change, but also maybe deluded because you're thinking about the good old days that have, went away, gone away a long time ago, and not really dealing with the present moment, what's going on then. So another thing, the first house represents, or you could, talking about the rising sign, the cusp of the first house, can talk about your physical appearance. When it's Cancer, there's going to be Cancer being ruled by the moon. The person may have a very round face. People usually don't like to have round faces. There are some exceptions, and for instance, usually when we talk about looks, we talk about women. So I'm going to use women as an example, but women having a moon face. I used the example before of Linda Ronstadt. I really should look at her chart, because I don't know what her rising sign is, but I know her sun sign is Cancer. And I know I'm not talking about the sun sign in Cancer, but sometimes these inner points I feel are interchangeable, and that even your sun sign can reflect how you look. But Cancer, also being a water sign, you could retain water very easily. And by the way, this doesn't have to just be about women. This could be men. Women, we know, do it sometimes because of their periods. Men could do it. Anybody can retain water. Maybe they just eat a meal that's very salty. I don't know. But anyway, it could be that your weight fluctuates, where some days you, like, other people look at you and like, or even just in general, like your appearance, and they're like, whoa, you look so different today. And maybe it has to do with water retention, but maybe it has to do with something completely different. It's just like you just have this tendency to look different because of the fluctuations of the moon. So that could be kind of an interesting thing. But one thing that could also be true for women is that you just always seem to gravitate towards wearing skirts and dresses. And this is due to the feminine nature of Cancer, but also kind of the old-fashioned or traditional tendencies where you may be attracted, like that's the thing you like to look like. I don't know how many people have seen that. I think it's a channel of this woman who lives like it's always like the 1950s or something. I think there might be more than there was actually I actually saw one where the woman lives like it's in Victorian days, the Victorian era. And so she was dressed like that. It's pretty interesting. So those are the kind of things that you may pick an era that you really like the 40s or the 50s, or maybe whatever, maybe the 60s. But I think it's something that looks more traditional, and you might want to emulate that, and that you find that style really appeals to you. And men can do the same, um, in terms of like how they style their hair. Maybe they style it in a what do you call that, pompadour or something, like Elvis, or to be very, or I don't know, just some kind of like old-timey, old-fashioned hairstyle. And so the other thing too is that Cancer can be very self-protective. And at the ascendant, you may feel very self-conscious. This could be a combination that's shy, but Cancer can be very self-conscious. And that could even lead, in extreme cases, to social anxiety, because there's like different, there are people who are introverts. Um, like for instance, I consider myself an introvert, even though I'm a fire sign, even though I'm a Sagittarian. I have Taurus rising. I have a lot of earth. I consider myself an introvert, but I'm not afraid to go up to strangers and ask them directions or something like that. Somebody who has Cancer rising might actually be like really nervous to ask somebody something because they're afraid that person might ridicule them, or be mean to them. And this kind of thing is, obviously on a spectrum, and there will be some people, maybe most people, they just simply are quiet when they're in a group situation. But for some people, it might be that, especially if when you were growing up, if you did receive a lot of teasing, then it could go into maybe like social anxiety, where it becomes a phobia. I mentioned in other videos with Cancer rising that I believe that this is the rising sign of what I call the crybaby. And I laugh when I say that because it sounds so insensitive. But what I mean by that is that when I was growing up, and this was in the 70s, so there was never any like, okay, you're bullying or anything. And this really has nothing to do with bullying. Actually, my definition of a crybaby is a child who cries at the drop of a hat. It has nothing to do with actually being bullied or ridiculed. But there, just to give like an illustration, and I don't know this person's astrological makeup, but there was a girl in my school who had a certain religion that required her to dress a certain way that was totally different from what everybody else was wearing. And in gym class, it really posed a problem because we were all wearing shorts. And I'm talking about in elementary school. And I remember her crying, maybe out of embarrassment, maybe out of like, oh my gosh, my mom would just like be so upset if she knew that I had to wear shorts or whatever. I think it was more like self-consciousness. But I just like can see, remembering in my past, like the kids who would really just, it was like they were curling up inside of themselves and they felt so embarrassed that they started crying. And that's, extreme self-consciousness. And I think that that is the self-protective quality that Cancer has for itself that can sometimes be taken too far. And what happens sometimes is that Cancer rising can be hypersensitive, and they can actually, take offense at things a little bit too easily. So if you are like this, you have to really like look at what your triggers are and really do some self-inquiry to see like what is, upsetting you, because you may find that it's something that has nothing to do with what that person was talking about, but it kind of reminded you of something else. And learn how to be more resilient, because the actual crab has that shell that it ducks into. We're not crabs. Humans aren't crabs, so we don't have physical device, parts of our body that we can crawl into, but we do have, a higher frequency that we can tap into, and that can give you that confidence. It's not like a false confidence, not like a cockiness, but even if somebody were to like come up to you and insult you, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Because for some people, it's like, oh my gosh, my worst nightmare would be if somebody, was mean to me or something. And, sometimes that does happen, unfortunately, where somebody is not kind to another person. So being very, learning how to toughen up, if you will, and also to learn how to, with your emotions, not necessarily wear your heart on your sleeve, because sometimes you may wake up on the wrong side of the bed. I think this ascendant can be quite moody. Now, if you're in a good mood, everyone else is going to sigh, breathe a sigh of relief. But if you're not, they're going to be, so-and-so is crabby. Get it today? So learning about equanimity, that's something that they teach in yoga, because the outer world isn't going to conform to us. And we have to be able to roll with the punches, basically. But anyway, looking at the sun sign, Taurus is fixed earth. Taurus is the rock. Taurus rules the second house of earned income. So it tends to approach life from a materialistic perspective. This combination actually is very good for money. Cancer is very good at saving money, and Taurus is very good at probably attracting money or making money. Because Taurus likes the nice things in life. So there's a motivation right there. Cancer wants security. And because Cancer is on the ascendant, you may have been raised to be a caretaker of some sort. Maybe you had to watch your brothers and sisters. Maybe, unfortunately, which, does happen to some people, if you had a parent who was incapacitated, maybe they had a long illness and you had to learn how to cook at a young age. Maybe they had substance abuse problems or mental health problems. So sometimes people with Cancer rising might develop into caretakers very early on, and Taurus, and that can make them also very astute with learning how to conserve money. Taurus specializes in money because it rules that second house. So this is a good combination for money matters and intelligence with money. As a matter of fact, you may work in that industry. Maybe you work in a bank. Maybe you're an accountant or like a financial planner, something like that. Another area that you may excel in is with a restaurant, in the restaurant industry. Cancer is the nurturer, and also I think the fourth house that Cancer rules does deal with the food industry. The second house deals with the food that we ingest. So I do think that somebody who maybe you have fantasized about opening your own restaurant, maybe you're a really good cook, and so you would be a good person to open a little restaurant or something like, or cafe, and just that feeling of taking care of others. I think another area that this combination may, I usually don't think of the rising sign as being part of the influence for the career, as well as the type of relationship that you have. But I think even like healthcare, because Taurus is physical. I mean, it's dealing with things from the physical plane, so that can extend to the body. And Cancer certainly has that caretaking, sentiment. And I think especially like nursing, because nursing, that could be another one. In terms of relationships, this is definitely a combination that would want relationships. And the good thing is, because these are both feminine signs, they form a sextile to one another. Now, your sun and rising sign may not do that because of the degree span between them, but they are considered harmonious signs together. And so the reason I say this is like sometimes people, their rising sign is really different than their sun sign, or like their Venus and Mars signs are really different than their sun sign. And what happens is that because the rising sign can be the way that we behave around other people, and even the way we look, we could attract certain people based on how we look that is totally different than who we are. And if we're not really self-aware, and we're just kind of like, oh good, somebody's attracted to me, I'm going to date them, and we're not really like paying attention to, I don't think we're on the same page. I don't think that we have the same vision of life, or the same life philosophy. Not that we have to have, carbon copy versions of these things, but it certainly helps to not be diametrically opposed to someone. And so you may find that you have this, this pattern of attracting people that really are not the kind of people that you want to be with. And yet, I mean, sometimes in this particular case, because the sun and the ascendant are harmonious, the way that you project yourself is consistent with the way that you really are. So people will not get a like kind of sticker shock, or no, that's not the right term. That's a totally different one. Just kind of like bait and switch type of thing. They're like, oh, you said you were like this, but you're really not. Like, for instance, if your rising sign is Cancer and your sun is Sagittarius, you might be a lot less of a homebody and a lot more extroverted, wanting to go out a lot and stuff like that, but you might look like June Cleaver or something. And I know if you're under 40, you probably have no idea what that reference is. But anyway, so you probably will want a family. You might even get married very young with this combination, because you just have such a strong desire to nurture and to love and be loved. Taurus can be very romantic too. Of course, you have to look at other things going on in your chart, and you can't just say that for sure, but I can generalize, and I'll probably be pretty accurate when it comes to that kind of thing. I think one of the main things this combination has to be careful about is being a stick in the mud, meaning that you don't want to be too rigid, like the Taurus can be, and too stuck in the past like Cancer can be. You want to be able to embrace new things, not just, the people that are like totally trendy and they never can like stick with anything, and they always like kind of like look down on the past as if it's like passe, but kind of balanced thing where there's nothing wrong with being traditional as long as the person is not completely like afraid of trying something new, doing something different than they've done before. Even something like as simple as trying a new food or something. If you really have that kind of, I know growing up with Taurus around me that there can be like this tendency to just eat a few foods over and over again because they're tried and true. And it's perfectly fine to have favorites, but kind of embracing things that are different, people who are different, and experiences, that are different. And even like, being able to not just associate with those people that you've known forever. You could have that kind of very tight-knit group, which is fine too. But being able to kind of like not see people who are not part of your family as the outsiders, and, having more of a universal perspective, sometimes. But anyway, I think I'll leave it here. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, I'm at rainamoonastrology.com. The link is below. Thanks for listening. Bye.